Okay, we removed the front screws for the top of the electronic cover. Now we're going to remove a few here. We're going to move here, remove all these spring-loaded screws. Every screw that you see back here, we're going to take out. And this is going to free this completely. And then we'll go to the next step. Okay, now that we've removed all these screws, you can see they're still laying here. We're going to go ahead and take the top of the electronic cover off. And you'll want to keep this because we're going to use this to remount into our DTG printer when it's complete. You'll notice a little plastic retainer here. This is just going to be snapped out. That's garbage. You don't want to use that. And then we're going to go over here, and what we're going to take out is this retaining rod. And you'll see there's a screw here, which is behind the motor. If you come up on top, you can see the motor here. So you're going to have to loosen the motor screw so you can get a screwdriver through the access hole to take that out. And then same over here, there's an access hole. Nothing has to move. You can go directly through the top here and take that screw out. Now that's free. So we're going to come over here and show you the motor side. So to get access to that screw, you want to loosen your motor. Just loosen it, don't take the screws out. And you'll need a small screwdriver. And you're going to go right down to the access hole. I can see here with the camera in the way. And we're gonna loosen that. You see that screw coming out. Go ahead and tighten your motor back. Just snug belt. You don't want to lose those screws in the process of working on the printer. So once we have these screws removed for this rod, holding it in place, I'm just going to take a screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver, and just give it a little pry right here. And you'll see it completely comes out. So all that we have left now is our original friction drive, which we haven't done anything with. You want to leave that in place for now. But we're going to make some metal cuts on the actual frame, because this is the center of your frame where your platen's going to be traveling. This bar has to be clear, and a portion of this bar has to be clear. So I'll go ahead and mark that, and we'll show you the next step. Okay, so at this point you see we've cleared the path of all the plastic components and we've cut those out. And just a general overview of what's left, you'll see it's just the metal frame. You've got your metal frame piece here, your metal frame piece here. We haven't done anything with that. You still have your original drive rod in. Here's the wire that we snipped from the plastic. And I'm just going to flip this over and you'll see that wire for the MIS controller plugs in right to the back of here. We're not going to use that anymore. So you're just going to snip it right there, but leave the plug in. Okay, and then we'll flip this back over, and you will see all the components left on it. We left the original motor in place, the original encoder in place. Everything is the same. That's going to stay in place. All of our board is doing is picking the signals off the Epson printer and emulating them to our own platen drive system, which uses a high torque motor designed to move that kind of weight. So you'll notice that's still all there. Just like we taped up our wires in the beginning so we didn't damage them. All these components are still here. Same with this side. We've taped up our wires. Everything is in place like it was. We've just stripped all of the plastic components off the center in an effort to clear the path to convert this to print on t-shirts rather than paper substrates or picture board, poster board substrates. So our next step is we have to modify this frame so the platen system can go through. So what we're going to do is we are going to make a cut here, even with this. We're going to make a cut here, even with this. We're going to make a cut here, even with this square, and same over here. So in effect, you're taking out this bar from here to here, and this bar from here to here. And that will give you enough room to complete the clear path for the plat. So I will go ahead and mark this with the square, and then we'll show you another picture. Okay, we went ahead and put square marks where we're going to actually cut this metal brace out, here and here. And on the rear side, see, we've squared off here and here. There's several ways to cut this. You can use a cutoff wheel, a bandsaw, hacksaw. It's pretty much your choice how you want to cut it. You just have to be very careful not to damage or bend the frame while you're doing that. Get a blade that's meant for cutting metal. Most important point here that I want to point out before any cutting happens, we're going to wrap this shaft area, this whole area here, in a plastic, including the carriage, and we're going to tape that up really well. We do not want any cutting dust getting on this shaft here. What will happen is, even though you think it's minimal, it'll build up because this is a lubrication on here, special lubrication. It'll build up, and when this carriage is powered up and starts to move in the printing application, it'll jam up because this motor for the CR carriage reads a resistance, and it's supposed to be within a certain value from the factory. So by getting trash on the shaft, it makes the resistance higher than it should be, and the printer will immediately error out, thinking that something's wrong with the printer because it's more difficult to move than it should be. So we'll go ahead and wrap this all up and prepare for cutting. We'll show you that before we actually make the cut. Okay, we have this all wrapped up and taped up prior to cutting. You want to enclose every nook and cranny that you can so no dust can get on that shaft. You see we left the friction draft shaft still exposed. We went right through the slot here. It's completely wrapped, covered from dust. We covered up all these edges where any dust or cutting stuff can get in, all the way across the back. So now we will go ahead and cut this. Like I said, cutting is up to you. You use a bandsaw, hacksaw, jigsaw, a cutoff wheel, anything that you're comfortable with cutting this. Just follow the safety procedures. Be very careful with the frame. Don't get the frame out of square or bend it or treat it rough during the process. And we will stop the video and commence cutting. Okay, we have just finished up cutting our path, as you can see, and then we've cleaned up all the cuts. Here's the leftover pieces, one from here and one from the back. So we've cut it, cleaned up the edges. You want to make sure your edges are clean and you don't get a burr on it that you might cut yourself. Next step is we're going to remove this bracket here. It's 2 screws, one here and one here, and this unit will come off as one piece. Just take a picture of it so you know how it goes back on. Purpose of that is we're going to make 2 cuts. One here, and that will give a level place for the spit tray to sit when you go to put your ink spit tray in. And then we're going to make another cut, the actual shaft, 1/4 inch from the bearing, so we can remove this portion of the shaft out. Like I said, your motor will still all function as normal, and we want it to spin just like it normally would in a normal printer, except for we're pulling signals off that using an industrial motor to drive our platen. So we have no need for the friction drive, just only to process the signals. So we'll go ahead and remove these screws, cut this, cut the shaft, and go to the next step. Now that we've removed this bracket with the 2 screws and pulled it out, we've made a mark here where we're going to cut this flat to accommodate our spit tray. We'll also want to remove these roller mounts because we won't use those. Simply take a pair of pliers, they're just pressed in, wiggle them back and forth, and they pop right out. Sometimes they can be a little stubborn, you have to hold it. But now those are removed, and now we can commence cutting that piece. Okay, so we've finished cutting our shaft here, and you can see I just put it in place so you see where it was cut, and you can go ahead and take the shaft out. We've cut it, cleaned our edge, and we've also replaced the 2 screws for the retaining bracket and cut this for the spit tray. So the printer path is complete. It's completely open to accept the platen system now. The frame is completely modified. So at this point we're going to go ahead and clean any dust that you may see off the printer, remove the protective wrapping, and proceed to the next step. See that we've cleaned everything up and removed the protective coating off the rod, and we're going to release the carriage, and there's a sensor that we need to remove in the bottom of the print head carriage. So I will go ahead and release the carriage lock again here with the screwdriver. Slide that over. You can see this slides nice and easy because we kept it clean. We're going to flip this printer over. And right here, you'll see a little Phillips screw. You're going to need a tiny screwdriver. You're going to take that screw out. You probably have to have somebody help you hold the printer because it's wobbly in this. There's a little plastic cover. It's going to come off with it. And you'll see a tiny sensor under here. We're just going to pop this sensor out. It's just see, it just pops out like that. All we're doing is unplugging it, taking it out, and now we're going to push that back up in there so it can't get anything on it. Best you can. And then sometimes when you put the cover on, it'll help put the cover back on, it'll help push it in there. So now we're just going to push this cover back on. Put the screw back in. Don't lose the screw. These are very hard to come by. It's a tiny screw. Don't over tighten it. And then that's back in there. The sensor is now removed. This reads if there's anything in the path. We control certain things with our electronics, so this is not needed. The next thing is this bearing that was to the shaft. You want to remove that. You can leave it in. It's not going to hurt anything. I always prefer to remove it. There's a little pin right here. You have to clip open with a screwdriver, turn it, and push it out. And we'll show you that process next. So we've released the clip here on the bearing and spun it upwards. And now you simply just line it up in the slot and push it out. You just dispose of that. Move the carriage back over, lock it into place so it can't move. It's locked. And then we'll go on to the next step of mounting the electronic box on the rear. For the most part, the printer conversion itself with all the modifications to the frame is completely done.